Welcome to this episode of Man on the Run Meals, also known as Motor Meals. Motor Meals focuses on the nutritional aspects of living a vibrant, healthy lifestyle, but there are other methods and paths that someone can use to achieve a long, disease-free existence where lifespan equals your health span. In 2018, I will bring you interviews with numerous experts in different fields of health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and self-care, as well as inspirational stories from men who lead exceptional lives by incorporating a wide array of healthy habits into their everyday. Today, we will speak with Dr. Phil Shinnick, who is an expert in self-healing, specifically in the art of Qigong. Dr. Shinnick is also an acupuncturist, a social activist, and a former Olympic athlete in track and field. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Shinnick. Really appreciate your time. My first question for you, with respect to your education, what exactly is your background within the field of medicine and self-healing?
I got an economics degree and then a master's degree in public affairs, a PhD in social psychology. I was a professor at Rutgers in history and sociology and founded the sports science department, and then I became a professor at New York Medical College and founded the Research Institute of Global Physiology, Behavior, and Treatment, which is now the Whole Person Self-Healing Institute. So I'm a scientist, I'm an athlete, and a practitioner in meditation and Kung Fu, Qigong, stuff that you know.
At this point in your career, which specific modalities do you use for your patients?
That I want them to do, or for me to prepare myself for them?
Actually,
let's go back in time. This was an important question. Somebody said to us at one time, "There's this guy who can heal without doing anything." And we said, sure, bring him in. So we brought him in. We've got the person who we felt was on the verge of death, heart attack, cancer, in pain, in a wheelchair, was 80 years old. So we brought her in and we said, go to it. So we had EEGs on their brain. And so he comes in and he looks at her and he smiles and says, "How are you?" And she says, I'm not that great. And he went there and he just stood there. And then we noticed after about 3 minutes, her brainwaves changed to his brainwaves. His brainwaves were at a really good Qigong space, very integrated, very calm. And I thought, my God, I don't have to be a great technician with my patients. I just have to be in a good place. So this changed everything. And so in answering your question, I feel that if I enter with a patient in an excellent state, and I actually hear what they're saying and listen, and I don't have distractions in my mind, they tell me everything that's wrong with them. And then I do a physical exam, and I palpate every organ, every part of their body, and I make charts. And then I look over with the patient, and we talk about what their state of health is. And so there's no theory. I don't have a belief system. I just know that in order to heal anyone, you have to be in a good state yourself. And the person that you're dealing with, if you listen to actually what they're saying, they will tell you what's wrong, even though they tell you they don't even hear what they're saying. So that's my general approach. Detailed history, all the medications, every single injury they've had, and it's incredibly exciting.
Sounds like
because it's fun, but it's a lot of problems with culture and habits and problems, and we talked before this interview and a lot of those problems, but I hope that that's part of an answer to your question.
My assumption with respect to recovery would be that since everybody's so individualized, everybody's recovery time is different to a degree.
I've treated a person, one person came in with a drop foot where they couldn't. And so I figured, well, it's the nerve here and I know how to do that. So I stuck a needle in. I knew that high frequency would reset the nerve. So I reset the nerve and he went out. I never heard from him. I thought for 7 years, I thought, Phil, you don't know what you're doing. These people go off, you never see them again. I have no idea. So I walked in because I was in practice with a psychiatrist, and I walked in, and in her room, her waiting room, was this guy. He jumps up and he says, Phil, he says, 7 years ago, you fixed my foot, and see this, it still works. So a lot of people don't come back, and I don't know what happened. And people say to me, oh, Phil, you have such great skills, you know, you heal all these people. And I feel nervous all the time because life is very unpredictable. I can get 9 good results with a kind of disease, and the 10th person I have to treat completely different. So I never feel comfortable in my healing skills because there's so many variables in our society and nature and in people's minds that we don't quite understand, you know.
Absolutely. Can you give us, I guess, as best as you can, somewhat of a layman's understanding of Qigong, so we could kind of get like a concept of how a person can go about self-healing versus necessarily coming to a practitioner?
Well, I think we have to start with the word Qi. What is Qi? Right here, this is Qi. This is the air. It's Qi. And right here, my heart is beating. There's Qi inside my body. And right now, I'm emitting Qi to you. So there's Qi that's emitted from people. So there's really 3 kinds of Qi. And in terms of the practices, there's really 4 practices. There's laying down and doing your meditation. There's sitting meditation. There's standing meditation. And there's moving meditation. So Qigong almost incorporates everything in terms of postures and so forth. In each of those categories, there's definite ways that you approach that in terms of the outer and the inner. I mean, generally speaking, I mean, I could continue to talk, but I think if we start with a framework, that would be good.
And the other end of it would be a Qigong healer that, let's say somebody has an ailment, they would be able to generate Qi and be able to possibly fix whatever ailment somebody. Is there a specific ailment?
Oh boy, this is really a good question because a lot of people say, and over here, Ben Wei Hua was a person who became a friend of mine. He was the abbot of the 9th Heaven temple in China. He was a weightlifter and also an opera singer. And we talked about this concept of healing. And a lot of times a healer will go and they'll put their hands and they'll say, oh boy, do I really feel the Qi. And I talked to him about it, and he says, oh, that's just that person trying to keep the other person out, because we have a field of energy around us where we don't want invasions of bad energy in it. So there's a thing called Nian Li, which is mind power. Say, I'll give you an example. There's a person who comes to me, and he's a diabetic. And so I use Nian Li, and Nian Li is this. You have to go into your heart, the person who's going to heal, and you say, I want to change this pancreas to normal. And then you put your finger towards the pancreas, and you say, like you're a little kid, you say, get normal, like this. So then he calls me an hour later, and he's yelling at me, and I say, Phil, I try to do these good things, and I do bad things. And he says, what did you do to me? What did you do? He says, my count is 280, and today it's 150. I've never been 150, which means he's normal, right? Yeah. And so I said, well, what are you going to do about it? He says, I'm going to sit down and have my chocolate and my coffee. I never saw the guys for 7 years. because habits. A Qigong master can change the physiology of a person, but the physiology will go back to where it was unless the person deals with the change in their own energy. So that there are really two kinds of healing. There's healing of the mind, and that's that wherever the mind goes, energy goes. That's almost not Qi, but it's part of Qigong. Mm-hmm. And there's healing or Qi healing. For example, I've seen a person, an older person, fall and literally break her hip. And Bin Wei He, he put his hand on that person for about 10 minutes with Qi. Mm-hmm. And she got up and walked and it was healed. So you kind of have to know what you're doing. And a lot of the things that people are trying to do is you have to be, in order to heal, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know exactly what you're trying to do. You know, what is it you're trying to do? Like, for example, I had a patient with a tumor in her colon. And so I knew that, so I had to think, well, what could I do to get the tumor in her colon to go? And I did the Nian Li, but also she had a hip problem. Mm-hmm. And also her father was assassinated in Algeria. And wow. So she'd been carrying this tension in her hip all these years. So even with the Qi, you have to know a little bit about the history, and they have to overcome some of their own physiology and the way that their body's set up based upon trauma, you know. So I'm not sure that I'm answering precisely, but in order to heal, you have to know what you're doing. Understood. What you're trying to accomplish, or it doesn't work. I mean, just Qi to Qi is not much.
Part of what I heard was that aside from any help that you or another practitioner may provide, at the end of the day, an individual has to take ownership over their own health. And when they leave your office, if they are back to normal, they have to continue on a path of living as healthy as they possibly can.
Well, I think in that case, there's a lot of differentiation. There's bacterial infections, which are immune problems that has to do with depression. There's traumas that a person had, like a whiplash or something like that. Now, like a whiplash where a person has migraine headaches and neck problems, I can do acupuncture very precisely and work on them for 45 minutes and they'll never have a reoccurrence. But if I'm dealing with a person who's depressed and they have a bacterial infection, to be able to get the immune system back in order takes a while, you know. And also, say for example, I have a patient who's got a neurological problem. It takes about between 7 and 19 days for a nerve to regenerate. So you can start that generation process. But I feel that if you can get a person back to normal, where they're not overcome with pain and that they have some hope that they're going to get better, they start thinking more clearly. And when you think more clearly, you start to do things that are better for you. I think that pain is distracting. You start to give up hope. You start to do stuff that's the worst interest. You get surgery, or you get all these drugs, or you get addicted to drugs. And I think that one benefit of treating a person, getting them normal, is that they can finally take a deep breath and say, life's not so bad, and be a little bit more chipper and cheerful. And being cheerful and being more optimistic creates good health.
Absolutely. I wanted to shift, since we're on the conversation of pain and injury. You published a paper about your own personal journey, self-healing through a traumatic spinal injury. How old were you when that injury occurred, and can you elaborate specifically on what happened to you?
Yeah, I was on a cruise ship because my son loves it. He can run around with the teenagers, and I didn't like it because everyone was gorging on food and they were overweight and getting sunburned and getting drunk in the daytime. And so I spent most of my time meditating, doing Qigong, and doing weightlifting and doing yoga. So we went to an island, and I was going to swim around the island. And so we get on this launch boat. It's about 30 feet, 40 feet long, holds about 100 people. I estimate about 20,000 pounds. And we were going along a oblique angle to the waves. They were about 12-foot waves. And the guy goes right into the wave and guns it, so he goes flying over the waves. And everyone is screaming like they're in a roller coaster. So he's trying to make the people feel, you know, a thrill. Well, I'm in the front seat, and there's nothing to hold on to, and I see the boat going right into the water, and for some reason I jettisoned out. I felt much safer in the water than there. I went up in the air, and I felt, and I'm rational. I mean, that's what happened. But I'm a jumper, so when we started going down, my legs jumped and I was in the air. The problem is the boat goes up. So the boat came up, I'm flying through the air, and it hit me right in the back at about 9 knots, 20,000 pounds, right square in the back. It was a terrible injury. And so I broke my back. I fractured my spine. I compressed my spine, 3 or 4 herniations, brain concussion. And so I packed myself in ice, and then I went back to the boat, and they wanted to fly me out, but I didn't want any of that. So I basically stayed in my cabin, and I was able, if I didn't move, I could be out of pain. I mean, not even an inch. And then this lasted for 2 days, and night and day, you know, breathing, staying, meditating. And there was a point where all of a sudden the pain took me over, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I just went into the deepest space, and I said, why don't I get an answer for this? It's a good question. Why there's no answer? Then all of a sudden, this huge breath came over, and I thought, hell, you're so stupid. The breath is going to bring you if you stay on the breath. Why did I have to go into inner space and have somebody, you know, tap my breath? And so I just stayed in my breath. I stayed in my breath. I listened to the sound of the breath. I listened to the texture of the breath, and I stayed in it, and everything outside of that was outside. And I was able to not experience that much pain. And then I went back, and fortunately for me, I went to an orthopedic surgeon who was the Ivy League champion in the long jump. So, you know, he stands up and examines me, and he says, well, we can put a steel rod in your back. But honestly, for Phil, is that people don't do better with that than not doing anything. Mm-hmm. So I decided that I would do an experiment, that I would not take any pain pills. So I never took any pain pills at all. And I just stayed with the breath. And then I was able to figure out getting in yoga positions. So I would get in the down dog position, and it wouldn't hurt. And I'd stay there for 2 hours. Mm. So, but the nights were hell. Every I'd say 10 minutes, I would go into extreme pain, and then I would turn over, and it was very hard to turn over. I'd go back and forth and back and forth. And then I would find a place where there was no pain, and then I would fall asleep for 10 minutes. And then when the sun came up, I was the happiest kid in town. I thought, a new day. And I was so happy to see a new day, but the nights were hell. And then slowly, what started to happen is that I started to ask these questions, and kind of, who's out there? Who's going to help me? And so what happened is this animal started to appear. First, the snake. It would be up in a raised position like this. It was all gold with a black head. And so then I would look at it and then go up like this and open my spine up and then hiss. This is a gung fu, you know, this is a gung fu. So my gung fu started then. And then I couldn't stand up. And then the bear came to me, and I stood up like a bear growling. And then the horse came to me. And so I think that that when you're really, really in pain and you have a connection to animals, the animal spirits come and heal. And this is very extraordinary. Now, I haven't had a visit by an animal in 4 years. And I was 70 years old, to answer your question when this happened, 70 years old. And my whole life I've taken care of myself. I mean, what kind of joke is this on me that I get my back broken? And every single day I have to deal with my broken back. And but it changed the curvature of my spine, changed it rotated it. I have scoliosis. But, you know, compared to most 75-year-old people, I'm in pretty good shape, you know. And I have all the Qigong and the Gung Fu and the yoga and the meditations. So every day it's it's a different thing. But I'm not in pain at all.
Wow. And
I'm strong. I can lift weights. I have a thing where I do pull-ups there.
Oh, wow.
You know. So
that's excellent.
But I do think that for most people, not like this spinal injury, but most people when they get pain, they see it as the enemy. But as an athlete, and I've been injured every conceivable injury you can think of I've had, and I've overcome it, is that we see the pain as giving us a clue that we haven't dealt and strengthened and gotten flexible that part of our body. So every time I would have a pain, I would see this as a way to get more flexible and to get stronger, and that the pain was showing me a tremendous weakness that I had. So rather than seeing it as an enemy, and I think that people come in and their stomach hurts, you know, they should see the pain as a way to remind that person that they are actually behaving in a wrong way that their stomach doesn't like, and they should start to behave and start to pay attention to their stomach and let their stomach tell them what to do and not taste. And for example, somebody has different pains, and it really gives them a good clue of how to get healthier, you know. And that's how an athlete thinks, is that pain is something that's very good for us. It gives us good information. Now, most of my patients, when they get into pain, the first thing they want to do is take a pill and get rid of it, rather than deal with it. But in Qigong, if you do your breathing and you get the qi starts to flow, and then you concentrate on the qi on the pain spot, it goes away. You know.
So concentrating on the pain spot, meaning actually instead of, I guess, masking the pain, actually focusing on the
you do the inhalation, and on the exhalation you breathe into the pain spot. You breathe into it, and you keep going back to it. You make peace with it, and there's the same thing in cancer. A lot of people, you know, they I got cancer, we got to get rid of it. Most of us have cancer right now, and our body gets rid of it, it comes back. I had cancer when I was a really serious cancer thing when I was 18, so I very much understand that when you don't take care of yourself, you're not eating right, you're overextending yourself, you're very vulnerable for these things, and that's the reason the cancer is there, not because it's an enemy. It's just that you haven't taken care of yourself. Ben Wei Hu and I did, for 2 or 3 years, 10, 20,000 people, we did Qigong meditations for cancer patients. Cancer patients who do the meditation twice a day, almost all of them survive because they're taking care of themselves. But American people, they want to do the chemotherapy, they want to do this, they want to do that. It's a long answer.
Absolutely. Do you feel? I know this is a question that's pretty maybe difficult to answer, but with respect to the self-healing arts, Qigong, meditation, I know currently meditation is making a move into the mainstream through the mindfulness movement, and there's been a lot more research going into the field of meditation, and they're seeing all these wonderful things happening to a person based on their brainwaves and all that good stuff. Do you feel like that's slowly finding a place within the realm of the medical system at this time?
I think it's better than it used to be, and I think that it's good. But we had this discussion before we taped this interview that Qigong has an incredible wide variety of approaches to things. And how I see this meditation mindfulness, it's about this much compared to the meditations. Now, they're probably dealing with a sitting meditation, but there's laying meditation, sitting meditation, standing meditation, moving meditations. And that's just one very small aspect. The fact that people are doing this is good, but you know, if you're doing sitting meditation and you're 70 pounds overweight, it probably will prevent heart attacks and strokes, and maybe even diabetes. But you know, you're going to pay the piper real quick if you don't deal with movement. Gotcha. And also there's standing meditations, which are very good, and then laying meditations, which is my favorite. I mean, people think, you know, that how could you meditate when you're laying down? To me, it's a spiritual thing. It's just for the soul. So there's a lot of varieties, and within each of those categories, there's hundreds of different practices.
Can you provide for the viewers something that they can do starting now in their lives to better their health with respect to this concept of Qigong and meditation?
You know, I don't like to show that I'm an Olympic athlete. I don't like to show that I'm a master in Qigong. But last spring, I finally made a commitment to the iron ox. Now, what is that? Why would I wear these beads? I went through Berkeley, the hippie thing, and I never dressed like a hippie. I just don't want to be seen as anything. And what this is 108 beads. And for the average person, if you did this and nothing else, things would go good. So you just take one bead, and you take an inhalation, and then you take an exhalation, you do the next bead. And that's all you do. This is the iron ox. It's the key to everything. And if a person did this, things would just be fine. Because when you're doing that, you're on a line of essence. And the line of essence is nature. Is that every single minute of every single day, we exhale and we inhale. And if you concentrate on that, you're into nature and you're into the primal vitality of life itself. And when you do that, nature teaches you. It's called the Tao Yin. It starts to teach you things. You don't need a master. And what I feel is we don't need a master, but we have to practice on a daily basis. We don't need a master. I mean, I met Ben Wei Hu 20 years ago and Kevin Chen, but you know, as an athlete, I was doing this in 1968, and a lot of the practices that I'm now learning, I was doing 30 years ago just naturally. So I feel that if people focus on the breath, that things will come to them naturally, because we are nature. And if you focus on what's natural, then your true nature will show up. And it's very nice. It's very comforting. And I think that when we talked about the animal form, is that when we're in our ego, we're isolated from humanity, from the planet. But when we start to breathe, all of a sudden connection starts to happen on a very subtle basis that's very cheerful, very nice.
Excellent. Quick question going back to the breathing, the deep breaths in, any specific thing that a person should time the breath maybe, or is it just as natural as the breath would flow?
I think at first the people should do 10 seconds on the exhalation and forget about the inhalation, because on the inhalation there'll be a pressure difference between the inside of your lungs and the outside, and air will come in. But the key thing about the breath is if you do a long exhalation, you empty your lungs. And if your lungs have air in it and you're breathing, you're pushing air on top of air, and you're not getting vitality. So the key thing is getting the air out of your lungs, fresh air comes in. And people have to understand how the heart works. The heart's not simple, but deoxygenated blood goes through your venous system, and there's trap doors up to your heart. But the venous system is not connected to your heart like the arteries are. So movement makes the blood go to your heart. That's why moving Qigong makes you healthier. And so then it goes into this side of your heart, and then it's pumped into your lungs. It's oxygenated, then it goes into this side of your heart, and then the ventricle contracts, and at the same time all the arteries contract, and then it goes to your body. But if you're stagnant, how are you going to get the blood back to your heart? And if you're breathing shallow, how are you going to oxygenate your blood? So this is a wonderful Qigong understanding.
That's
I mean, it's and one other thing we talked about, which is, you said, oh boy, this side hurts.
Yeah.
Well, I did this for 10 years. You can do the long exhalation, but you bring the breath in your left side and you take it out your right nostril. In your left, out your right. And what this does is it coordinates the left and the right. And most of us, I showed you some charts earlier. Most of the people are there's an asymmetry. Say, for example, they're really tight on the left side of the neck. Well, there's two arteries going to the medulla oblongata here. So if you don't have good circulation this side and this side, that means that the brain has to compensate in order to get good thoughts into the brain to work. So you're using up 30% of your energy because you're out of symmetry between the left and the right side of your brain. And so a person who has that problem could simply use the iron ox and come in and go out, come in and go out. And what I found after doing this for 10 years on a daily basis is that I could tell what was happening. Is that if this was blocked, I was dehydrated. If this is blocked, I ate too much food.
Wow.
And then when I could feel the air coming across my front lip, sometimes it would be hot. And then I would know that I'm hot inside, or it would be very thin. So I could get a diagnosis of myself on an hourly basis of what's happening, whether I need food, I need a cup of soup, I have to cool myself down, or the breath is cool, means that I gotta, I'm getting too cold. So, what doctor is going to tell you that on an hourly basis? Yeah. So this is really superior medicine. All of this is superior medicine, I think.
With respect to the technique, how long would you say it takes to go through all the beats that a person would need on a daily basis to really better themselves with respect to their health?
Well, if you went through 108 of these, you'd probably get through it in about 4 or 5 minutes.
Wow.
It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long at all, But I think that as you get into these meditations, the key thing is by doing these meditations, you're really in the present. And the past and the future absolutely do not exist. I mean, we're in a matrix. Right now, we are in a time period, and in a half an hour, we're in another time period. And in that half an hour, everything changes in the world. There's a new thing. So the continuum isn't, we always think there's a continuum. There's not necessarily a continuum. So I feel that the more you meditate, the more you learn things that are given to you naturally, and you end up doing more. But you came up with a very good thing, which is that we get to a certain level, we meditate for 10 years, and then we go about our lives as if nothing existed. But let me tell you that we did some research, and people like that who say did 10 years of yoga or 10 years of meditation and they forget it for 30 years, when they get to the end of their life and they have a disease and they realize that they didn't continue it and they start again, they get better because they have done the practice. So I think that doing a practice for a long time and forgetting about it is not bad. Is it probably what it means is that they like that level of existence. They could get into a higher level, but they're very happy with that. But when it starts to go bad, immediately they'll remember, and since they've done it a long time, almost in the day that they start, things will start to get better for them. So I don't worry about people who get better and then they forget their practices, because they're going to have to pay the Grand Reaper, and when disease starts happening, which it will, they'll have a leg up on everyone.
Gotcha. You mentioned athletics and your background in athletics. With respect to meditation, Qigong, any advice for athletes for ideal mental prep with respect to any type of competition that they might be in?
Well, I practiced in 1972 something that I call the unity of opposites. Is that when I was meditating, doing the deep breathing, what I did, I would take a half an hour to put myself into a really good place by long exhalations, get very calm, and as soon as I was very calm, then I would go through my event step by step, almost in slow motion in my head. And then while I was laying totally still, and then I would get up and get in the different positions, the takeoff where I would like be in the air and I would get different positions, then go out into the field, run through my steps, and then on the end of the runway go and think nothing. And it was like I was meditating in a room. Total calmness inside of my body with my arms and legs just flying like crazy. Yeah. But in that particular day, on the fourth step to the board, for some reason I rotated my left toe out. And I'm going like grease lightning. I mean, really fast, but it all feels slow motion. So I thought, So next step, I put my left foot, my toe in. I jumped 8 meters, something. It was the second furthest jump in the world. And so I think that it's really wrong in competition to be thinking. That you have to really, you have to be in your body and let it do what it knows it's supposed to do and don't interfere. But how can you do that when you've got a funky brain? I mean, in Kung Fu we say the mind is nothing but a drunken monkey. And who brings all this crap into our mind as these thoughts come in? So an athlete, what you want is you don't want anything coming up. You want to be not thinking, pretty much, but totally aware of everything around. And that's when you do well, because like my son just did a swim meet, and he was on the verge, and he ended up missing the turn, because where we were at, the turn was on a floating island rather than a wall. So he didn't see the wall coming up because he couldn't see it, because there was open water underneath. It was just a thing. And so he made a mistake on the turn, and then instead of getting first or second, he got fifth. So being totally aware and seeing things in a different way. But that takes a lot. I was 72. I was 29 years old, and my son's 18. So, I mean, he's a young guy. I mean, he still does very well. He's a good swimmer. But so I personally don't like people telling me what to do in athletics. I never had a coach, and most of the coaches told me the wrong things. But if you do meditations and you do breathing, things will be shown to you. I really feel that we can learn through the ethera. We can learn wonderful things if we calm our minds down. It's all available to us. And that's the key thing. emptiness leads to everything.
Gotcha. Usually with respect to the shows that we do, Motor Meals, focusing on nutrition, is there anything that you specifically do food-wise, or any advice that you have with respect to nutrition for the general public?
No, because it seems to me that the primary thing with nutrition is your stomach being able to digest food. And what that means is that the gallbladder has a little bile, the pancreas has a little juice, it goes into the stomach. It's like fire and water, and if there's too much fire, you get ulcers, and if you have too much sugar, then you don't digest food, and then the person becomes white, pasty, and malnutrition. So, and also people have are raised with different kinds of foods, and different cultural groups, or have different kinds of food. So what's good for 80% of the people is really terrible for 20%. So I think the most important thing is to be able to get your organs to be synchronized so that you digest food. Now, there's a lot of talk about you need this much and you need this and this and this and this, but the fact is that there's been whole civilizations who have gone generations on just one food. Rice, or like the Eskimos, they just eat the fats. Right. So I think that we're incredibly adaptive, and there's a thing called transmutation, and they did some studies on chickens where they completely eliminated all calcium in the chicken, and they still laid eggs because they took another element, the chicken, and converted it into calcium. Wow. So I think that we have within our capabilities, if we're not getting the proper nutrients, it takes another chemical or compound and switches it to that for life's purposes. So it's much more sophisticated than that. And I personally, what I think that all people should do, well, maybe people won't like this, but I think that you should really eliminate a lot of foods. For example, I went through 10 years where I eliminated dairy and sugars and only ate vegetables, no salt. And I got to the point where carrots were like candy, and they were and my taste would change. And so I think that a lot of what happens is that people go by the taste. And if they love something, even if their stomach hurts, they'll do it again. So it's a question of habits, but I do think that a lot of people are allergic to different kinds of foods, and the only way to get out of that is to purify your diet for a long period of time, and then slowly start to add the things that you had before. And I've done two 10-year things of, like, I'm Irish. I thought, well, I can't drink alcohol because I'll be an alcoholic. So I didn't drink alcohol for a long time. I had no cheeses, this and that. But now, at this time in my life, I can do almost everything to a limit. But if I do it 3 days in a row, I get acid reflux. So I follow my stomach. And people don't follow their stomach, they follow their taste. And that's where it really takes them down. And that's willpower. And a lot of people don't have the willpower. Fortunately, as an athlete, I'm very disciplined. I mean, I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and train, or 11 o'clock at night. I can do anything I want, but most people don't have that willpower.
Gotcha. Understood. You recently wrote a book, Whole Person Self-Healing, A Science and Art. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and what readers can expect from the book?
Well, it would be a really good book if people bought it and used it as a reference, but this is not a popular book. What it basically is that it's the research I've done for the last 30 years, and I'm only talking about what I learned and writing about what I learned. And I did this with also a group of scientists, but it's written for scientific people on electromagnetisms, It's written for medicine people. I did a thing on chronic heart disease, spinal injury. It's written for the regular person on meditations. I did a survey of Tibetan yoga, Japanese, and Chinese, the great treasures from all of those. It took me 2 years to do this, and then I wrote 2 chapters on meditation where I show the different things that happen in meditation. But it's not a cookbook, and I didn't write this for popular consumption so much, is that I felt that if I get this in the library, somebody's going to appreciate this down the line. And, and it cost a lot, but it is hardbound, and it took me 2 years to write, and it is published by a scientific publisher, and I was reviewed by 3 sets of scientists, so there's no mistakes in here. Wow. And even though they completely disagree with my conclusions, no one can take anything away because there's no intellectual argument for it.
Excellent. Do you feel like maybe academia will use that eventually at schools for teaching?
I don't know. I'm not hopeful. I see people, sell 1 million copies of a book that uses 2 very simple ideas, but this is much more complicated. But I do this mostly for peace of mind. I mean, I've spent so much time, the data, some of these chapters took 6 years to write, some of them 7 years. And what happened is I basically washed out my mind. Everything I've been working on, everything I cared about, everything I wanted to do has been done. And so now I can do other stuff, like you saw the article I did on Amazon medicine. Yeah. And then I did another one on cultivation of a scientific mind versus a Qigong master's mind. So I feel free. I think that I write to be free intellectually. I don't like a lot of stuff in my head. I don't like to maintain things, and keep going over the same things. I like to have nature give me new ideas and new gifts,
Excellent. Writing is the outlet for all that.
Yeah.
To come out. And the art, of course, as well.
Now, here, people can see this. This was done 2 weeks ago. This was a Qigong. There's a place right in front of our third eye that is called Heaven's Gate. And you do a whole series of different meditations, and then it appears. And this one over here was 2 months ago. That was a meditation I learned in China. And these things appear, and the one up there appears. And so sometimes when you meditate, these wonderful things appear and then they're gone. These things, this one here lasted 20 breaths. This one here lasted 5 breaths. This one here lasted a half a second. So some of these appear and they go. But I think that what it shows me is that nature never comes up with the same thing. It's constantly changing. There's new things that happen. People say, oh, these are portals. I asked a friend of mine, Master C in China, what these were, and he says, this is a picture of immobility. Nature is very fluid, but sometimes if you look at nature, they'll give you an image, but then it's gone. I don't know what this is all about, but I think it's interesting. These are like photographs of the mind, and I just paint them. I think it's interesting. These colors. This one on the top I really like, but I've never seen those colors. This one here, the same way. And this one, this is a nice one. And this one here too. I like this one. This one is 3 months ago. And this one here is 25 years ago. And I think this is my time in Japan. So this is, this is my Japanese one. And this one here is 15 years ago. How can nature be rectangle? What is that all about? Yeah. But I think that the nature has different shapes,
Thank you for your time today, Dr. Shinnick. We really appreciate it. You taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your expertise with us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for everybody for checking in today and giving this a listen. I feel like there's a ton of excellent information here for everybody to be able to walk away with some concepts that they can use in their life to better themselves, better their health, and go about living a fulfilling life.